Good afternoon. Welcome to the Monday, April 8th, Barrington Select Board meeting. We're also going to have a work session to follow. First off, call to order.
Hardikoff here.
Gabriello here.
Gibson here.
Sakosha here. Let's rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Agenda review and approval.
I actually wanted to pull G off the consent agenda because this is different than what we talked about at planning board.
Okay.
I'd second that motion, Chairperson.
Roll call.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gabriello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakosha. Okay, now can I get a agenda review and approval as amended?
Motion to approve. As
Second
amended.
it.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gabriello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakosha. Okay, that brings us on to public comment and invited guests.
Just public comment to start.
Yep. I don't think I see anybody online.
Nope.
Nobody in here. Okay, we're going to close public comment and on to public hearings and invited guests. Is there a representative from the school board that would like to be?
We got
Whoa,
Perfect.
We're
What
excited.
Fiona's pleasure. Yeah.
Come on up.
I'm just gonna make those microphones green.
All right. Well, congratulations, Mr. Walker.
Yeah, I guess that's what you call it. Congratulations.
Just added so many more meetings to your calendar.
The Dannon's coming in. Yeah.
But we can wait a minute for Dan. It's nothing worse than coming in right in the middle of as people are starting.
I attended the first school board meeting just to witness Rick being sworn in. Only the second time I saw him with his hat off.
This is the third time.
Yeah, this is. So I look forward to counting these up.
Just because there's snow on top doesn't mean there ain't a fire in the heart, right?
That's right. Something like that.
All right.
Great.
All right, welcome, school liaison.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having us both here and for collaborating. I know this is really long overdue, so I'm so excited that, and I know I speak for the school board when I say we're all excited to get this started. And you all, whoever is going to be your representatives, also probably just added a bunch more meetings to your calendars. So thank you all for your time. I know that a lot of the work that people think we do is just in front of the cameras, but there's so much behind the scenes. And so just thank you for that. We know that it will really benefit the community. And I just wanted to give a few updates on some of the things that have been happening at the schools. So I chose one event from each building to be fair to all the buildings. So we had kindergarten information night at the end of March. It was the most packed I've seen it in the last few years, which was so great. Lots of energy, lots of little kids, and lots of really nervous looking parents. So it was great to see so many people. Then we also at the middle school had Seussical Junior Musical, which was over this weekend. It was great, even though there was snow and some people didn't have power, they still trudged on. So I'm very proud of that. That we're supporting the arts and making great use out of the lighting that Mr. Walker helped to make sure that we had safe lighting. So, and then also at BES, and I think also at the other schools too, but mainly at BES, there was a solar eclipse party that was hosted by our PTO, and there were lots of families there. So many, so we had to use Quest's parking lot. And so thank you to them for that, because it was a very full parking lot, but it was safe and the kids had a lot of fun. They learned a lot all day about solar eclipse and science, and I just heard a lot of science vocabulary and interested energy. And the minute they put their glasses on, they were so excited. So I think they thought it was going to be immediate. Like they didn't realize how slow of a process it would be, but I thought it was really great. It's always great to see all of our kids get together. So that's all that I think that I had so far, but I wanted to give Rick an opportunity too to mention anything, or if you had any questions.
Do you have any sense of kindergarten enrollment, the numbers?
The projection? It was listed, it was stated at one of the meetings recently, but I can't remember that number off the top of my head. I can have Deanna email you.
I'm just curious if it's a big jump. or not. So just,
I remember us discussing that it's higher than normal. And I think that I can be assured that as the months go on, if it's already higher than normal interest, it's going to continue to be that way.
Is the
Good to know.
kindergarten full-time?
Yes.
Any good news about the collaboration and communication joint committee?
Yes, and so I'm not sure if you've all had a chance to look at the amazing notes from your town administrator, but there was something at the last meeting that we discussed. I think it would probably be better to discuss it as a committee, but we were trying to identify as a board where it's a new committee and it's not one that's mandated in any way by RSA. What will this look like? And we want it to be beneficial for both sides and really for the community. But what's our goal? What is our purpose? And so Deanna, the wordsmith that she is, while we were meeting, penned together something that I know she shared with Connor. And so a vision of the proposed charge would be to execute communication and collaboration between the school district, school board, and the town select board in order to promote fiscally responsible decisions as they pertain to all taxpayers in Barrington. That is a rough draft. I know that that's something that probably the first few meetings will cover. And at the meeting when Dan came, thank you so much for always coming to our meetings. He mentioned that he might be one of the people interested in being part of that committee. And I know as we're still ironing things out, I didn't know if there was any word of anyone else or if you were going to discuss that tonight.
That's open for discussion tonight. I was actually thinking Joyce and Dannon for those two. If you guys are okay, would want to take that
I
on?
I would accept that.
Okay, there you have it.
Perfect. And I know that Deanna currently, our fantastic superintendent, and Connor already meet on a regular basis. And so I had guessed that you two would be able to figure out a schedule for us and then we can start getting things on the calendar and actually getting some work done.
Excellent.
And just to follow up a little bit, we talked the other night trying to get an idea from the other four members of the five of us what it kind of looked like. And correct me if I speak out of turn, but I think what we're interested in is trying to collaborate on different ideas, putting things on the table. More importantly, do it at the lowest level possible. So if there's things that Connor and Deanna can do to say, hey, here's how we can help each other on the smaller scale. And then obviously if something was bigger, then it would be the committee would come back to the respective boards and say, hey, they've come up with this idea about doing X or Y, and what's the committee's thought? Is that kind of the idea you're going to have with you? I mean, it's really all about, at least for me, looking at how can we stretch the taxpayer dollar and get as much out of that dollar as we can, whichever way it goes, whether it's the town government doing something for the school government or vice versa. And so that's pretty fair.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we are too.
Good. One of the things that was talked about at that meeting, I think, and I think we probably ought to emphasize is this committee probably won't make a lot of decisions, but it'll certainly recommend to each of their respective boards possible ways of collaborating. So I'm a little concerned about the term collaboration, suggesting that maybe the committee is going to make decisions, and I don't think that was the intention we brought forward, or that I think it was conceived in.
Perfect.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I think the idea that there's a joint committee with stakeholders from the select board and the school board will make it really valuable for getting the buy-in from the overall groups between the school board and select board. So obviously the school board and select board will still make decisions, but having two representatives from each group as part of that decision-making process and making recommendations to ultimately be decided separately is going to be really important. And I look forward to working with the superintendent to bring forward proposals to that collaboration communication committee on what we can do now and what we can work towards. There's a lot of things that we do separately that we're under agreement for that agreement may not lapse or line up for a year, 2 years, or 3 years, but starting now, putting pen to paper so we can pay attention to that will make it really valuable. There's a question about enrollment, so I pulled up the superintendent's deliberative session presentation. So ECLC preschool, current enrollment 63, projected 72. Kindergarten, I think, was the question. Current is 99, projected is 100. BES 419 to 420. BMS is 402 to 404. And then the big difference is in high school, 455 current year, projection is 414.
Only one of those is another class.
And we know how projections go, so that's just the toe in the water. But usually we don't project as high for kindergarten this early. So, and I believe that they've been updated. I will get you the updated numbers because Laura mentioned something in the
Didn't she say
meeting.
104?
Yeah, it's definitely over 100.
The
But
one
I
that sticks
can't
in my
remember the
mind.
number.
How do we end up losing 41 high schoolers?
Just the
Dropouts.
They move out of district.
Okay. Wow.
I think there was a drop in there. Anyway.
Yeah, and then there's an age group there. You'll see over time as we continue to work together that there are some years that something was in the water and that grade has 20 more students than the grade standard.
We can thank Mark for handling the storm the way that they did. I had a that day on Barrington roads, and when I had to turn onto 125, that's where the snow was. I was like, in the middle of this.
Alrighty, hey, thank you. We're back. We had a little power blip that shut down the computer. We've restarted it, resumed the meeting, and invited guests with the school liaisons. Do you guys want to touch on anything else, or?
As much as I know that the initial projects for this joint, I don't want to say, did you not like the word collaboration, or did you like it? Or this getting together of our boards is I think there's a lot of short-term potential, but I also know that long-term, especially as you're all entering your strategic planning meetings, we do ours in July usually. It will be important as our town is growing, and a lot of that does affect our town offices. It would be great to work together on some of the longer term projects that are things that have to go to warrant or that really require a lot of communication to the town. And so I think that there's some really great potential there as well.
Agreed. Any questions from the board? Well, thank you. Thank you both for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, I'm going to open up public comment for the acquisition of the town center lot, map 239, lot 7, per RSA 4114A for Map Town Center.
This is the statutory process the select board uses to either buy or sell or acquire interest in properties. So there's 2 meetings that the select board will have, public hearings, and then a vote. That's that meeting we'll have just to vote on April 29th. Conservation Commission met on March 14th. Planning Board met on March 19th. Their recommendations are included. Obviously, voters approved this, so it's just kind of cursory process at this point.
Tracy.
Is the road that I see on this map actually the name of that road? It's called Federal Way?
I think since it serves as a driveway right now, I don't think it's. I don't think that there's a road sign there because the address of the post office is on Malago.
Okay.
But maybe it was laid out as a road and that name was reserved. But
I saw it on there and didn't know that was a. Oh, it was just reserved, so it's not the name. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, don't see any public comment online. Couldn't hear, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. Okay, next up we have the consent agenda as amended.
motion to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Excellent.
What was the amendment? I'm sorry, I missed that.
We removed G, authorized maintenance work on Dry Hill per RSA 236-911. And then are we going to put that under new business, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So you had a first and a second. Do you want a roll call?
Roll call, please.
Sure, guy.
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Sakoshai. Okay. Next up is appointments. I have appointments A through D. Does anybody have any discussions on those appointments?
I do not. All of these people have served before and have been contributing to the town.
That's right.
Same here. Thank you for all A through D, all your continued volunteer to the town.
Absolutely.
Do we have to have a vote on that?
This discussion.
It'll be voted on next meeting. Yep.
I thought this was.
April 22nd. And we'll probably keep up with the practice of putting those up for a vote on the consent agenda. Obviously, anybody can be pulled off, or we can break out into non-public if necessary, but and to do that as well. And more applications for appointment continue to trickle in, so we'll be up to this probably into May or June.
Just reached out to 2 applicants for zoning. Hopefully they respond.
Great.
On to staff report.
Is there any more discussion from the board on A through D? I was just giving a little time to scan through if you had it. If not, then we will move on to Dan. And are you all set?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I read it before.
On to staff report.
Great. I just have a couple of notes here. First, we're at the first meeting in April. I want to bring some attention to the work anniversaries here in April. Again, a real top-heavy list of employees, which is terrific. So our own police chief, George Joy, was hired in Barrington 25 years ago. Started his law enforcement career in Barrington 25 years ago, and 25 years this month. John Booty in the fire department was actually Barrington's first full-time firefighter, and continues to work with the department in part-time capacity, 21 years. Deb Griffin, town clerk assistant, has worked in the town for 13 years. Linda Markowitz, who, as you know, is retiring at the end of this month, marks 11 years in Barrington this year. She came to Barrington as a certified tax collector. Chris Eldridge, an officer in the fire department, has been in Barrington for 11 years. David Kinnison, fire department, for 8 years. Cody Guile, who actually just accepted a position in the city of Portsmouth. So unfortunately, that will be soon be a vacancy in our fire department, but was hired in Barrington 5 years ago this month. Henry Resnicek, our most youthful officer, has worked in Barrington for 3 years now. Adam Cook was hired in the highway department 2 years ago, as was David Schultz in the highway department. Dave Levesque in the fire department 2 years ago. Casey Couch in the fire department 2 years ago. Alan Clement in the fire department last year. And our library director filled a kind of extended vacancy in the library, Elizabeth Bolton, 1 year ago.
Excellent.
Only other thing is I'll continue to draw attention to the upcoming training opportunities, including the local officials workshop, which is going to be May 7th, the second round of that. Right to Know training on April 17th, and then a Hard Road to Travel workshop on May 9th. And then again, the Municipal Association Conference was moved to the 30th and 31st this year. Please.
I noticed in our town email that the Hampshire Economic Board is holding a planning and zoning all day.
Right.
Would you suggest that we attend that?
I think that absolutely. I mean, if you're interested, so this is the Planning and Zoning Conference. It is. It's an all-day affair. It's highly recommended for all Planning and Zoning Board members as well as staff.
Okay.
I think for the Select Board to maintain awareness in the world of planning and zoning, especially if you look at last year where we had 19 zoning amendments. So I can make sure to draw attention to board members for that.
I plan on.
And that's put on by the state, as Tracy mentioned, PEA. And that's all I have. And there's nothing additional to sign on behalf of the Municipal Office Administrator.
Okay, on to old business. Classic private road building policy update committee recommendation. Does the board have any discussion on that?
I read the entire thing and I think it was excellent what they have called attention to and some of the verbiage that they have changed.
John Huckins, come on up. We have a member from the Classics and Private Road Committee here, and then we also have Ron Allard. Ron, do you want to come up? Okay.
Yeah, my issue is with that amendment for the red listed roads. There's 2 Class 5 roads on there. This is a Class 6 and private road policy. I don't think they should be on there, especially where they say there's no building. I can't deny a building permit on a Class 5 road. If there's an issue with a Class 5 road, it's the town's responsibility to take care of it. And as some of you know, in the past, there's been issues with people saying they'll see something like this. They'll say no building permits allowed. They're going to be the code enforcement officer. He didn't do his job correctly. He gave out a building permit when I got no reason to deny the building permit. So for that reason, I really don't want that on there. And the committee voted to take that off during our last committee meeting.
Okay, and what were the 2 roads?
It was CV Bridge Road and the one on off of Toll and Orchard Hill.
Okay.
And
They
so,
both have issues, and I understand the issues, but I think this is not the proper place to put them.
and I think in support of reflecting the interest of the committee and the recommendations of, hey, these are roads that have deficiencies, the attachment, the proposed attachment says that regarding the Class 5 roads listed, the planning board should require updates to the road specifications detailed in the subdivision regulations for any subdivision on the road or road segment listed below. Because I think from the fire department's perspective, the roads, preparing a list of roads that have issues is important for multiple reasons. As it relates to this policy update, the select board should take notice of those roads that have such significant deficiencies that should be rectified as part of the Class 6 and private road building process. But similarly, those class 5 roads that have noted deficiencies should be considered by the planning board during any future subdivision application for road improvements that may be required for that. And so having the list all in one place, I understand, might cause, as was originally presented, might cause folks to misunderstand why class 5 and class 6 roads are combined on the list, but including the note at the top of the list that says, hey, this includes class 6 roads and class 5 roads relative to the class 5 roads for the planning board to take notice. So if that's sufficient to the select board, or if you'd like to add to that, we certainly can.
Well, I've done through this whole bit on class 5 roads to where there's off-site improvements. We did that on Scruton Pond Road. We did it on Malago Road. We did it on Mary Hill Road. There's a whole process for that. There's a legal process to handle that, which has nothing to do with class 6 and private roads. And I've seen how things in this town get twisted when they see something in a policy, and I can see someone looking at that class 6 and private road policy and twisting this to say something it doesn't, just like it has on other things that have happened throughout the years. And why let a problem get created by putting it in that policy when it doesn't serve that purpose? I think there's a lot of roads that could go under that off-site improvement that are class 5 roads that have issues. I mean, you can take Canaan Back Road was dirt, almost all your back roads, dirt roads that are class 5s. So you could have a whole list that the planning board should look at, which is totally different than this. And I think that's legit, but I think putting it in this class 6 and private road policy is just going to make more problems than it's going to fix.
David?
Yeah. It occurs to me too that the only time the select board gets involved with it, if it's a class 6 or a private road, we don't have any say really on a class 5. I mean, we're not asked to intervene on class 5. So I would kind of agree with John that might ought to come out of this. Obviously, it's a planning board issue. It's an issue. I mean, we're responsible for those roads. We need to improve those roads. But I don't think this is the particularly the right place for that part of it to be in there.
Tracy, then Joyce.
What was the response of the rest of the committee when you?
They decided to take it out of that last meeting, and Rick told Ron that he would like to keep it in there. And when Ron told me he was keeping it in, I said that the committee had to make that decision, not him. And then he threw an email out, and the only people that responded back said to keep it out.
Okay. So, okay.
So you may have just explained my question, because Ron, I thought we had decided not to include the class 5, but maybe we said send it back to the committee.
Yeah, this list was.
Here, you just got to come up. You're not on the recording if you're not at the microphone. Sorry, Ron. Thanks.
Is that green?
You got to make it green. Yep.
John's correct. The committee originally wanted to take it out. Fire chief understandably had a problem with that. We did do a virtual vote, and the committee reaffirmed that it wants to take those class 5 roads out.
Okay.
So,
and I think the fairest compromise is to simply recognize, and I think, John mentioned that there's maybe other roads that should exist on a separate list.
Mm-hmm.
And so having a separate list that exists of those class 5 roads that need improvement, whether the planning board should take notice for off-site improvements as part of a subdivision, or the select board take notice for future capital improvement projects.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to, the fire chief prepared a list, and I wanted to bring his concerns forward to the select board.
Sure.
But the committee voted against it, so we're going to submit a revised list with those off there. And we're also, on the list, it says bring up the class 5 standards. We're going to change that to the select board minimum road standards, because there really is no class 5 standard.
And that's what it says in the list that I brought to the select board.
Okay.
Yep. And so if we pull off Orchard Hill Road, we should clarify that there's still a section of Orchard Hill Road that's class 6 beyond the class 5 portion.
Yeah, even Seaview Bridge Road, there's a class 6 section, but all of it's in conservation, so none of that would ever get built on the class 6 portion, because after the home that just burnt, almost all that land's in conservation on the rest of that road going down through.
That's a good point.
I appreciate you bringing this up, because there are many things that come up with historic information that without having a very appropriate written documentation.
I see many things get twisted over
Sure.
the years.
Well, I think historically we lose things, so thank you for bringing it up.
So do we want to leave both roads on the list, but indicate that it's the class 6 portions only?
Oh, we could do it that way.
That makes sense to me.
That makes sense.
I see
the-
this is discussion, we're not, we don't have to vote on this.
Well, the other thing I
Well,
would
we could if
suggest, for
people
the
are ready.
sake of, into perpetuity, is that I think that our zoning officer has indicated that single-family permitting would be allowed, and so I think there needs to be verbiage that indicates that.
Well, if we remove the class 5 portion altogether, then that just makes it consistent with the class 6 and private road building policy process.
Do you feel that going forward, the next?
Yeah, well,
zoning
CV Bridge
officer-
Road, I don't think would ever be built on farther back. Orchard Hill, part of that road's upgraded, but there's a lot of Orchard Hill that needs a lot of upgrading. But the selectmen in the past on Orchard Hill had done the 10%. So if it's on that red list, you don't do the 10%. You got to build it right up to the 16.2 and 2 for the next building permit. So I think Orchard Hill, where that 10% is worked and you're bringing it back to make Orchard Hill say the next person out there has to do the all the way and not 10%. Why would you do that just to that one road and not the others? I mean, I know there's some on there. The other ones on there are real goat paths. I mean, the other ones on there are, some of them, I don't know if you could get a four-wheeler down through, the ones that are on that
But it was
list.
my understanding from what you had said earlier that it would be subdivisions that would have to bring.
Well,
pertain
subdivision,
up to-
well, for off-site improvements on a town-maintained road is when the subdivision thing comes in for off-site improvements. But your class 6 and private road policy right now, they do 10% of the home value for upgrades, and that's what this policy continues to say. The ones on the red list would have to be built up to the full 16.2 and 2. If it was 50%, 100% of the total cost, it doesn't matter. It just has to be done. That's what's on that red list. So that's the clarification of what that red list is. So if you leave Orchard Hill on that red list, and that means the next building permit has to build it to that whole standard, not just do the 10%. I just want to make sure you understand what you're voting for when you vote.
Yeah, my
If
understanding.
it was on
The class 6 portion.
the class 6 portion.
But that list,
Suggest to remove CV Bridge and Orchard Hill completely, correct?
I think Orchard Hill, I think if they did the
And that's
10%, it
what
would
the
be,
board said as well.
that's what the board had said. You were there at that meeting when
Yeah,
we just,
to
yeah,
remove
to
it
remove,
from-
just to remove them.
I thought it was the class 5 portions because CV Bridge Road, and I guess there's separate sections of the class 6 portion of Orchard Hill.
There's some sections that, yeah.
There's some sections that people live on and have been upgraded, but there's some sections of the class 6 portion of Orchard Hill which are go path. And CV Bridge
All the way
Road,
up to
all of the,
125, right?
well, yeah, it connects with Substitute Road.
Mhm.
Old Green Hill, yeah.
All of the class 6 portion of CV Bridge Road is a go path.
Yeah.
The class 5 portion isn't
correct.
a lot better, but definitely better. So it's up to the select board.
But if you read on that list, it gives the sections of it being narrow on the class 5 sections. It describes what issues on that list need to be fixed.
I think they wanted to pull the class 5 portion out.
Yeah, but but on that, if you read that, you would have to take out more than just the class 5. You would have to take out the description of it being narrow when you
Right.
first come in. And then the hill on Orchard Hill, you'd have to take all that stuff out because
Exactly.
that describes the substandard issues on the class 5 sections.
Right, yeah, so the reference to the class 5.
Where it does not apply to this specific
policy.
policy, I think it should be removed.
And a separate list that compiles these two and other class 5 roads which are substandard and should be considered for offsite.
And that would be under the planning board.
But it would be good, I think, like Connor said, that the selectmen to realize it too, because a lot of your class 5 roads you look at on a regular basis as far as your consistent upgrading, try to fix your worst roads, and before you know it, your good roads are your worst roads if you can keep up. It's just when you get behind, it's hard to catch up. So there's, then of course that other development came in on Canaan Back Road that I think is going to go away, but that's a whole issue that if it's on that list, then it's kind of like, we know that it's substandard because the planning board technically to do the offsite improvements have to declare it as premature and scattered, and then they can look at the offsite improvements, but the town has to pick up its proportional share. So there's a whole math formula of proportional share. So it's not free money where the developer comes in and does it. because the whole thing with Malago Road, almost all that money that was taken ended up going back to the people that paid the off-site improvements because the town didn't spend the money within the 6 years timeline to do all the stuff to the bridge, which was the reason why all that money was taken to begin with. So the town has to hold that money in non-lapsing accounts, and the interest and everything goes back to the people if they don't do it within 6 years because the town didn't pick up its proportion. I mean, it's a whole legal process. Yeah.
Any further discussion from the board? I think I'm hearing
Specifically or about the policy?
about the policy.
I get more.
Okay. What are your questions?
So if the select board rejects category 3, they can appeal it to the ZBA.
Mhm.
But I have trouble with prior to that, the waiver process. This is where our select board has stumbled in the past when people are requesting a waiver. And I don't feel that it really kind of says what example, what would constitute a waiver? I mean, I think the descriptions of what's acceptable improvements has really been spelled out well. Any diversion from that, I don't see what we would grant.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and two things on that. First, there's case law in New Hampshire that says that a municipality can't veer from a policy unless it has a waiver provision, period. And so it's either you have a policy and you apply that policy by the letter of the policy in every single case, no matter how nuanced, or you have a waiver provision that gives you the authority to, in rare circumstances, deviate from the policy. I think
Because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
Like, we don't know what an unintended consequence of that may be.
And so I think, and you bring up a good point about the last revision of the policy and the waiver process that was followed. And I think the problem was that waiver process was much too broad, and everybody that came in wanted to ask for a waiver. And so the committee doing the good work of spelling out more specifically what constitutes road improvements, allowing the work with the road association, that narrows the opportunity. The intent of that was to narrow the opportunity for a waiver significantly. But the problem is if you don't have a waiver process, you can never issue a waiver.
Okay.
And so the second point is that as part of the update of the policy, staff have been working on updated application documents and also a separate waiver document, which kind of guides the applicant to the kind of the high bar necessary to apply for a waiver and to be considered for a waiver.
The waiver to the select board has no fees for the person applying, whereas if this board rejects that waiver and it goes to ZBA, there's certainly a very different, financial investment to request a variance.
And the standard of that waiver that's written in there is very similar to what a variance is for the ZBA. They're really close to the same.
5 criteria.
In this policy, we also had specific language for other things they can do that weren't spelled out before. So you can acquire rights of way, easements, things like that. So we specifically say these are things you can do with the 10% that most people wouldn't think of. A lot of times when they try to do the 16, 2, and 2, the right of way isn't there to do that. So this gives you the option, either by yourself or through the road association, to acquire rights of way to widen the road.
So there were developers, builders on the committee as well, right? And so what was the impression of the 10%? Because I remember in the past, the 10% question was, is that too much? Was there a cap, 10% or up to a certain level? Where did that land?
There was discussion.
The recommendation.
There was discussion about a cap. At the end of the day, the committee decided against a cap. And the reason for that was, let's say let's say the cap was $50,000. And I do $400,000 house, I'm on hook for $40,000. Then somebody does. We had one recently came through that was $900,000, and he gets to do $50,000, and he's doing a $900,000 home.
Right. So
we didn't want to. It seemed unfair. 10% seemed to be a more fair way to go. If you're doing a house is twice as expensive, why shouldn't you do twice as many improvements?
I agree with that. There was just conversation around a cap, and I was just curious.
It was discussed, and developers, we had a pretty good committee, and then we had, we did developers on it. Jim was on it. Fire chief was on it, He was kind of more in the, let's do more than 10% if it's necessary. His point was, which is a good point, a not unreasonable point, is, why should someone be allowed to build 1,000 feet down a road and only contribute 10%, which doesn't do anything to improve the road? I still have to get my equipment down there. So he was kind of, don't do 10%, improve all the way to the property line. So I would say, he stepped out, so not to, say his position, but I think that's where he was. My equipment's gonna get down there, and if I can't get down there, it doesn't matter if it's class 5, class 6, or, if the guy spent 10% or not. So he was kind of on that, and then we had the contractors on the other side.
And that's part of the reason that red list of roads, that motivation came from that disagreement. And the committee not only did it have great makeup, including road associations, but a broad spectrum of interests in the class 6 and private roads in town.
Sure.
And so they met countless times, kind of workshopping all the different options. Ultimately, the policy isn't changing a lot. There's a lot of really, the changes that are made are really impactful because I think it'll make the whole process better. But they workshopped all that, and there definitely wasn't unanimous agreement to every change, but the committee worked, as committees do, and proposed all sorts of alternatives and voted on what the recommendation was going to be. And so I think having that buy-in and the stakeholders at the table for this update will make implementation of this policy a lot more robust.
Yeah, the verbiage changes and the clarification on many of the different
I think one of
parts of the
I'm sorry.
policy were well done.
I think one of the concerns before was sometimes the 10% was triggered. It was related to the dormer, so we changed that from volume to living area. So that would
Because another one got a pass because they didn't add living area, but they added living area, but they didn't add volume. So that was the thing where it kind of narrowed it back
And we
in.
defined what living space was, anything over 7 feet.
Mhm.
So we added some language in that I think it'll probably make it more fair when it's applied.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking back to when I was reading through this, thinking back to the different cases that we had before us, and we were definitely addressing some of the challenges we had with.
All right.
The 10% wasn't like everybody was happy with, but it was something that seemed reasonable, I guess is the best way to put it.
In support of that incremental improvement.
Any further discussion from the board?
So the two things in front of us is either make a motion to approve removing class 5 completely
In references.
in references, or make a motion to clarify.
It seems like there was the most consensus with removing the class
Okay.
5
Yeah.
portions, and then we can separately take action in the future to prepare this list. I
Okay,
can work
so
this
I
out.
would make that motion.
Motion,
Motion to approve with the removal of the class 5 roads.
second from Dana. Roll call.
Hendrick, aye.
Article 5.
WOI.
Gibson, aye.
Koshak.
Only one clarification. So I don't think there's any disagreement on CV Bridge Road because the entire class 6 portion is in disrepair.
Mhm.
For Orchard Hill Road, there's a section of Orchard Hill Road which is class 6, which is maintained and people live on it, and there's a section that is unmaintained, people aren't living on it. I think the building inspector was advocating personally that the maintained portion of the class 6 has been eligible for the 10% in the past, and should that section be on the red list or just the section beyond that what is currently maintained? Does the select board have a position? Select board needs to have a position, I guess.
I think on a position, I think if it's class 5, then it's a separate issue. If it's a class 6 road, then this should apply. And I don't know that we need to.
But the
we
red
just need to
list,
say-
So where is it?
We're talking the red list, not, yeah.
I'll
So that
pull it up on
class
the map.
6 and then class 5 and then class 6?
Class 5 road when it first comes in.
Yeah, right.
Then there's a section of class 6 that, I think there's 4 houses out there now that have been systematically upgraded already, and the people maintaining it, and it goes back and forth
There's
pretty well.
lots beyond.
Now you go beyond that, then it gets real bad. But if someone wanted a building permit in that section or just past the class 5 section, because there's still a couple more lots there, can they do 10% because the road's already pretty close, or do they gotta make it to the 100% there no matter what the percentage is?
When you say building permit, you don't mean for a new building, you mean for additions on already.
Well,
on
new
property.
buildings,
this is
additions,
only category
ADUs,
3.
all of them.
Yeah.
All of them would be category 3, all those things I just described.
So here's Orchard Hill Road. So Toll End Road is in the upper right of the screen. If you can see my cursor, Orchard Hill Road comes up. This is all gravel. You can see where it necks down here. This is all class 5 up to this turn here. We've talked about how we have these class 5 gravel roads. This was a farm. Back in the old days, the community would agree to maintain basically these driveways as roads because it led to doctors or farms or whatever else. So anyways, this is Orchard Hill Road, where there are driveways up to this point, and beyond that, it continues down out just out.
Yeah, see where the
back here.
house is? That's right from there, that's class 6 going down to the corner.
Which-
That's pretty well upgraded. It's not perfect, but it's,
So the question
We
is,
can't pick and choose.
no, the question to the select board is very specifically, do you want all of Orchard Hill, the class 6 portion from this intersection down to be on the red list? Or do you want just the portion beyond where is maintained down on the red list?
I would say all of the class 6 portion, because what's happened in the past with other applications is people say, well, it's just my segment to the point where it's not 6 that I should have to improve. The idea is incrementally to improve the entire portion of the class 6.
Okay.
And so I think we stumbled across this before where they said, well, I only have like 100 feet before it's not. So.
Okay.
Agreed.
I agree.
So there's other nods? I mean, that was a quorum.
So are there building lots on that class 6?
any of those
There's two, you
existing
said.
squares are technically lots of record that you could ask for a building permit if the selectmen authorized the construction of the homes on the class 6 and private road.
But it's all subject to this process.
Correct.
Fine with that.
Okay, so the entire class 6 portion of both CV Bridge Road and Orchard Hill Road will be on the red list. Reference to the class 5 portion will be removed. We have a new policy.
We'll
Excellent.
make that change.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Hard work.
Welcome work.
Okay, on to new business. We pulled off, it was G from the consent agenda.
That wasn't what you pulled off.
Authorized maintenance work on Dry Hill Road per RSA 236-911. Joyce, you asked us to
Yeah,
be.
so
removed.
I would ask our town administrator to review the RSA 236-9. For us, this applicant was before planning board, but he was talking about adding a second accessory dwelling, which was going to, it was just a conceptual. He
So
wanted
this
to
was-
talk about, so how is this different? Because I didn't get a sense that he talked about this.
Excellent question. Separate issues, but related because that conversation facilitated the information sharing, that certain work that maybe that property owner has already been doing to the road should probably have permission just to simply maintain. So, and this isn't uncommon. We have class 6 roads that are maintained that people live on, and those people maintain the roads. They hire people to maintain them, or they do it themselves. The select board has never stood in the way of people maintaining the road that they live on and that access.
Yeah,
Where-
we would want to encourage that.
Of course. And so, but technically you need permission, which is where 236-9-11 comes in. Where this select board has drawn the line previously is when somebody wants to make construction improvements to the road. You remember Swain Road a couple of years ago, the gentleman wanted to come in and install geotextiles to shore up a section that always got bad in the mud season. And the select board said, we're okay with you doing that, but we want you to submit a plan, we want you to submit a bond, and we want our engineer to oversee the project. So there's a difference between maintenance and construction. It's possible that this property owner will come forward at some point in the future when he irons out plans that will go before the planning board and all the rest to improve Dry Hill Road more. He's already bringing in material, using his tractor to grade the road. He only lives out there. So he's already doing the maintenance work, as is good, as is expected. But he should really kind of have formal permission because that's how the statute is written.
So are we going to ask him to bond it? And
No,
have the
just for
engineer-
maintenance, we haven't required roads to be bonded, but any work as part of a accessory dwelling unit or a subdivision or a commercial
That will trigger
expansion,
that.
that would trigger through the planning board potential upgrades to the road, and those upgrades would be brought before the select board, just like they were on Bumford Road, to authorize improvements to be overseen by the engineer and to be bonded.
Thank you for that clarification.
And with our new class 6 policy, if they wanted to do some construction, those improvements up to a certain period of time could count towards
Exactly.
But that would be new construction, right, versus maintenance?
Correct. Yep. Improvements, right? Widening, installing culverts, things like that.
Okay, we ready to make a motion on this?
Make a motion to authorize Nathaniel Gray of 345 Dry Hill Road to maintain Dry Hill Road, a town-owned Class 6 road.
I would second that.
Okay, roll call, please.
Answer, guy?
Hardikoff, aye.
Capello, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Koshai. Okay. Select board reports, concerns, starting it off with Mr. Manstrak.
I'm at the end of the line. School board presented much of that work. Just incidentally, the library also had a viewing party at the playground today. They gave out sun chips, moon pies,
That's cute.
and
Brilliant.
Starburst. And then they had a Sunny D drink, which I might add is terrible, but everything to do with sun. And they handed out glasses, so there were lots of kids there too, and lots of adults and nominal adults.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Tracy?
Let's see, we had a zoning board meeting I was not in attendance on, but there was an approval for a variance for the placement on a 1.4 acre lot of a garage. And then the housing committee, due to the storm, was pushed to this week. Is it this week? I think it's this week. So where we should be looking at what would be the final draft and then presenting it after this meeting for
Excellent.
the master plan housing chapter.
Beautiful. Joyce?
Planning board, I mean, the only applicant, but he actually just came in for conceptual, was the individual we talked about on Dry Hill Road. And we're looking at rules of order, what you saw here, and the technical review group, which we just approved on the consent agenda, which will be a way to sort of formalize what we're already doing, but having department heads give comments. And what the applicant there, because we had an issue with conceptual developer, somehow didn't get the report from the heads of departments, and there was a real disconnect at the planning board meeting with that individual. So in this case, they would all be in the same room and all hear it.
And these are
at the same
updates to the bylaws for planning, or just for the updates to the
rules of procedure
procedure?
and subdivision. Did you see those? We passed those.
Yes.
Excellent. Rob?
Don't have a lot to add today. The Energy Committee meeting was canceled this past Thursday because of the storm. The Library Building Committee has met, and there's plenty that can be done, but there's some things that just can't be done until actually the bond is approved later this summer, and the town actually owns the property. But certainly all the planning and stuff is in place, and we were just ironing out details around how bidding processes would occur, and how would we to ensure the greatest transparency and wise use of funds and stuff was going to play out. So.
Excellent.
And there's going to be an energy charrette
Yes.
that was rescheduled. I don't have the rescheduled date. Do you?
I do not know the
Okay.
schedule. Yeah.
But this is, if anybody is interested, as many people have, about the energy efficiency components of this building, and especially as part of the renovation, the library trustees are contracting with the Resilient Buildings Group to host an energy charrette where all of that input can be discussed. The representatives from the architect and construction manager will be there. And so the information of when it was rescheduled, maybe the date hasn't been finalized. I guess they have to look at calendars, but we'll get it as an agenda or as a calendar item on the town's website if you're interested in that.
Yeah, one of the things that came up too is trying to determine about solar panels. Mm-hmm. And there's an opportunity to get a grant to put solar panels in the library. They're trying to figure out what's the most ideal location, roof versus ground. One of the questions that came out too is that the voters approve a certain budget to have the library done, and so the panels were not included in that because they were going to be a separate grant item. Question of similar to the no law, that if someone turns something down, we can't pay anything onto the safety building, can we actually pay above what the voters approved?
And I talked to the library trustee chair about that today, and I'll get her an answer. there's a statute, it's RSA 31:95B, I think, but it's, if adopted by town meeting, allows the town and the library trustees to accept and expend unanticipated revenue. So anytime we get a grant over $10,000, we go through that process. So I suspect that the cases that were brought up at that meeting were in communities that haven't adopted that statute, but I'll confirm just so we know exactly.
That was our impression, but we just weren't sure.
Just kind of on that, at the board meeting, the library board that I talked about last time we met, we did discuss that part of it is the optics of this, that people did ask when they were addressing the library, are there going to be add-ons to this? Assured people add-ons. Granted, if it comes out of a grant, it's not going to cost anything, the optics. Are we having mission creep? Real concern, although not as.
Well, and the grants usually have some kind of match.
Well, I understand.
So,
Yeah,
so
that's
that,
the issue.
yeah.
Right. Rec department gearing up for spring sports, dealing with mud season. Gardening is going to be coming up as well. We heard from the Classics and Private Road Committee tonight. I have not got a chance to catch up with the Technology Committee. I'm assuming they're doing well. I haven't heard anything this week.
Yeah, they haven't been meeting. We're
Yeah.
still implementing some projects previously decided.
And no update yet on the grant for fiber. So.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to open up our second public comment of the night. Anybody in studio or online? Don't see anything online or in person, so we're going to close public comment. No public or non-public session is not required tonight. And we're going to end up going into our strategic planning and 2024 goal setting work session.
Okay, motion to adjourn our regular meeting.
Second it?
Roll call.
And Rick, aye.
Hardikoff, aye.
Gabriella, aye.
Gibson, aye.
Scotia.
Thank you, Carrie.